Most people assume that early success is proof of intelligence, discipline, or destiny. By 30, they expect clarity. By 40, stability. By 50, a legacy. And when these milestones don't arrive on schedule, the conclusion feels obvious. Something went wrong. But Carl Jung noticed a very different pattern. In his clinical work, he repeatedly encountered individuals who struggled early, wandered for longer periods, and matured later not because they were weak, but because their psyche was structured differently. These individuals weren't meant for early success. They were designed for deep, lasting success. Jung recognized something that modern culture still resists. Not every mind is built to peak quickly. Some are designed to develop inwardly first. If this describes you, the confusion and delays you've experienced weren't accidental, they weren't mistakes. Feeling behind wasn't a flaw, it was a signal that your life cannot be measured by ordinary timelines. By the end of this video, you won't just be told how to succeed, we'll understand why your life unfolded the way it did and what happens if you misread this pattern. According to Jung, misinterpreting this structure doesn't simply delay success, it can fracture the psyche. Once you recognize it, you cannot unsee it. Early success seems harmless, even desirable. It brings praise, clarity, and the comforting sense that life is unfolding as it should. Society treats it as evidence of intelligence, discipline, and destiny. By a certain age, progress is expected. Direction should be certain. Identity should feel solid. Early success favors adaptation over understanding, speed over depth, imitation over reflection, and external alignment over inner truth. For many people, this works. They adopt roles quickly, commit early, and move forward with minimal internal resistance. Jung discovered, however, that not all psyches work this way. Some individuals possess an unusually active inner life. Their thoughts are layered, their emotions complex, their conscience acutely aware of contradiction. For these people, committing too early to a career, belief system, relationship, or identity carries a psychological cost. The psyche resists not loudly, not rebelliously, but quietly and persistently. Motivation wanes, energy drains, but constant tension appears to the outside world. It's often mistaken for laziness, indecision, or fear of commitment. Jung warned that this interpretation is deeply mistaken. The psyche does not fail randomly. It will actively resist external success. If that success threatens inner integrity, this resistance is not failure. It is self-protection. Jung explained that when the ego constructs a life the deeper self cannot recognize, the result is neurosis. Anxiety surfaces without an obvious cause. Depression appears even when outward circumstances seem stable. A subtle, corrosive sense of living someone else's life takes hold. For certain personalities, the psyche intentionally delays success. It slows life down, creates obstacles, and introduces confusion, not as punishment, but as prevention. Prevention of a far more damaging collapse later. Early success demands an early identity. It requires committing to paths before truly understanding yourself. Deciding who you are before you can question authenticity. Jung saw this as especially risky for inward-oriented minds, because a prematurely chosen identity becomes a psychological prison. Many who achieve early build their lives on unexamined assumptions. They inherit ambitions without asking if they are their own. They adopt values because society rewards them, not because they resonate. This can appear to work for decades. But often by midlife, the unconscious demands attention. Meaning fades. Achievement feels hollow. Jung observed this repeatedly. Early achievers collapsing inwardly later, forced to confront questions they postponed when it was easier to keep moving. Those who struggle early, however, face these questions before achieving success. That timing changes everything. If you were not meant to succeed early, your psyche likely sensed danger long before you could explain it. You felt resistance where others felt excitement. Hesitation came where others rushed. You questioned paths others accepted without thought. This was not indecision, it was discernment without words. Your inner world was too strong to be overridden, Jung believes such individuals go through an extended developmental phase, during which psychic energy turns inward rather than outward. While others build structures in the world, they build structure within themselves. This phase can feel unbearable. You feel behind, misunderstood, defective. Yet, according to Jung, the opposite is true. You were being protected from premature crystallization, from committing to a life that would later harm you from within. Imagine succeeding early, committing fully before questioning deeply, building a life that appears impressive but feels false. Undoing such a life later is far more painful than delaying success early. Divorce from identity, career abandonment, psychological collapse, these are the costs of premature adaptation. Those who bloom late pay the price earlier, so they avoid paying it later. Confusion instead of collapse, delay instead of despair, loneliness instead of inner betrayal. If early success never came easily to you, it may be because your psyche refused to cooperate with false alignment, may because you lacked ability, ambition, or intelligence, but because you were built for coherence before achievement. Jung believed some lives must form slowly or not at all. If this describes your inner structure, then what appeared as failure was actually restraint. That quietly protected you from achieving success at the cost of losing yourself. While outwardly it may have seemed like nothing was happening, something profound and invisible was unfolding within you. Carl Jung believed that when external progress slows, internal development often accelerates. For certain personalities, life does not follow a straight line. It moves inward first. Energy that others expend on status, recognition, and momentum is redirected into the psyche. This redirection is rarely conscious. It happens out of necessity, not choice. You were not idle. You were incubating. During this period, your inner world grew louder. Questions surfaced with no immediate answers. Who am I without the roles I play? Which parts of me are authentic? Which desires are truly mine, and which were inherited? These questions yield no quick results. Jung warned that confronting them too early or too deeply can isolate a person from society's collective rhythm. While others seemed to advance, you felt suspended. Time moved differently for you. Years passed, yet resolution did not arrive. The result is a particular kind of psychological discomfort, despair, but disorientation. You are moving, but there are no visible markers of progress. Jung recognized that this stage is psychologically demanding. The ego craves certainty and reassurance that effort will be rewarded, but the psyche offers none. Instead, it demands honesty. You begin noticing contradictions others ignore. Paths that appear successful feel hollow. Environments that reward conformity over truth feel restless. Many people abandon this inward path, forcing themselves into socially acceptable roles simply to relieve tension. Jung observed that, while this provides temporary relief, it often leads to long-term dissatisfaction. Those who endure the tension without surrender undergo subtler transformation. The work during this period is not purely intellectual, it is emotional and moral. You encounter aspects of yourself you would rather avoid: doubt, envy, fear, resentment, and inadequacy. Jung called this confrontation with the shadow inevitable for anyone pursuing individuation. Most people postpone it. You faced it early, without guidance, validation, or even language. This is why the period felt so heavy. You were dismantling illusions about yourself and the world, while others were still accumulating them. Because this work produces no external rewards, it often feels pointless. You may have wondered why insight did not translate into visible progress, why awareness didn't bring relief. Jung would argue that insight alone is not the goal integration is. An integration requires time. The psyche cannot be forced into coherence. It must navigate confusion, contradiction, and uncertainty until a deeper order emerges naturally. This is why advice rarely helped you. Your process could not be simplified or rushed. As the years passed, something subtle but essential began to shift. You became less reactive, less easily impressed, less eager to prove yourself. Situations that once triggered anxiety began to lose their hold. You noticed your tolerance for superficiality diminishing, while your capacity for solitude grew. Jung saw this as a sign that the ego was no longer desperate for external validation. A different center was forming, one that did not rely on applause or approval to feel real. From the outside, this still looked like delay. Internally, however, consolidation was occurring. Values were clarifying. Priorities were realigning. You were no longer searching outwardly with the same urgency. The question shifted from "how do I succeed?" to "what kind of life will not fracture me?" Jung considered this the pivotal moment when many late-developing individuals quietly crossed a threshold. They stopped trying to catch up and began preparing to stand apart. This stage does not feel triumphant. It feels quiet, often lonely, yet carries a strange sense of inevitability. You may not know exactly where you are headed, but you start to trust that movement will resume once alignment is complete. Jung believed that when the psyche completes it, the questions that once tormented you don't vanish, but they lose their intensity. You stop demanding instant answers. You tolerate ambiguity without panic. This is not resignation, it is psychological maturity. You no longer force life to move faster than your inner structure can handle. Instead, you sense that your timing is not broken, it is simply different. One of the most noticeable changes in this phase is the collapse of comparison. For years, measuring yourself against others may have felt inevitable.
How?
Their progress could spark anxiety, envy, or quiet shame. Jung saw comparison as a symptom of an ego still seeking guidance from the outside. When your inner center strengthens, comparison loses its hold, not because you feel superior, but because others' timelines no longer dictate your sense of self. Their success does not threaten you. Their failures do not reassure you. You begin to experience life as a separate, psychological system, governed by its own logic. This is also when your relationship with ambition changes. Earlier ambition may have seemed inconsistent, sometimes absent, sometimes intense but directionless. Jung noted that ambition misaligned with the self either collapses or becomes compulsive. At this stage, ambition grows quieter but sharper. You no longer desire everything. You seek only what fits. Goals that once tempted you lose their appeal. Opportunities that would have impressed you earlier feel irrelevant. What matters now is coherence, not advancement. Resonance, not recognition. Others may misinterpret this shift. They might see you as indifferent, withdrawn, or overly selective. In reality, your psyche is simply unwilling to expend energy on what does not belong to you. Jung believed that energy conservation is a hallmark of late psychological development. The psyche stops scattering itself across countless possibilities and begins to focus. This focus creates gravity. Your presence changes. You speak less, but your words carry weight. You react less, but your responses are precise. You no longer rush to explain yourself. This phase can feel unsettling because it lacks visible drama. There is no breakthrough moment for others to see, no milestone to announce, yet internally something decisive has occurred. The ego has relinquished control over life's pace. The self has begun to lead. Jung described this as the point when a person stops living as a collection of reactions and begins living as an integrated whole. Competing desires and borrowed expectations no longer pull you apart. Even uncertainty feels different now. It no longer feels like failure. It feels like openness. Another subtle transformation appears in how you relate to authority and external validation. Praise no longer intoxicates you, and criticism no longer destabilizes you. Jung considered this one of the clearest signs of individuation. When your sense of reality is no longer dependent on external approval, you achieve psychological autonomy. This autonomy is often mistaken for detachment, but it is actually stability. You can engage with the world without being controlled by it. This shift also changes how people respond to you, even if they cannot explain why. Some are drawn to you, while others feel uneasy. Jung noted that individuation often triggers projection. People sense solidity where they feel uncertainty. Your calm exposes their inner chaos. Your patience highlights their urgency. This can inspire admiration or resistance, sometimes both simultaneously. Earlier in life, you may have been overlooked. Now, you are noticed, quietly, but unmistakably. If the earlier stages of your life were defined by delay and inward labor, this stage marks readiness, not readiness to rush, but readiness to act without betraying yourself. Jung believed that once inner alignment is achieved, movement resumes naturally. Opportunities appear that do not require self-denial. Paths open that feel inherently appropriate. Life stops feeling like something you must chase or fix and begins to feel like something you can finally enter. This is not the peak, yet is the threshold. Crossing it does not make life easy. It makes it real. Once this inner alignment stabilizes, life begins to move again, but not according to society's expectations. Jung observed that for individuals who develop inwardly first, outward momentum returns quietly, without spectacle. There is no dramatic turning point, no sudden declaration that life has begun. Instead, action emerges from necessity rather than anxiety. You act because it feels true, not because time is running out. This distinction is crucial. Early success is often driven by fear of falling behind. Late individuated movement is driven by inner coherence. At this stage, decisions become fewer, but far more decisive. You are no longer pulled in multiple directions. The noise that once distracted you fades. Jung argued this indicates the psyche has stopped leaking energy. Earlier in life, much of your energy was consumed by internal conflict, doubting yourself, resisting paths that felt wrong, questioning whether you were failing. Now, that conflict diminishes not because you have answers to everything, but because the fundamental question, who am I allowed to be, has been resolved internally. This is where many late developing individuals surprise others after years of appearing stalled. Something solid begins to form. You may commit to work, relationships, or responsibilities with a level of seriousness that seems sudden to outsiders. Jung would argue that nothing about this is sudden. It is the result of long preparation. While others experimented outwardly, you refined inwardly. When you finally commit, you do so with your whole psyche behind you, no second-guessing, no hidden resentment, no sense of self-betrayal. Your relationship with effort transforms as well. Earlier effort may have felt exhausting because it was. Divided part of you wanted progress, while another part resisted the direction that progress demanded. Now, effort feels cleaner, not necessarily easier, but cleaner. You are no longer pushing against yourself. Jung believed this alignment is what gives late bloomers unusual endurance. They may begin later, but they rarely burn out. Your energy is focused, not scattered. This is also when the quality of your work transforms. You are no longer striving to prove your worth. Instead, you are expressing something that has been tested internally over years. This gives your actions a new texture. They feel deliberate and efficient. Nothing is wasted. Jung observed that individuated individuals often speak less but convey more, do less but accomplish more. Their actions carry weight because they are authentic expressions of an integrated self, not attempts to compensate for emptiness. At the same time, this phase brings a new challenge: visibility. After years of being unnoticed or misunderstood, people may start paying attention. They sense stability where they feel uncertainty. Jung warned that this attention can feel unsettling for late bloomers. Old memories of rejection may resurface, and you might hesitate even when opportunity aligns. The temptation is to retreat into invisibility, where it once felt safer. But Jung emphasized that refusing your rightful place is a form of self-betrayal. Individuation does not end in isolation. It requires participation. But on your own truthful terms, your relationship with power also transforms. Earlier in life, authority may have seemed dangerous or corrupting, may have linked it to manipulation or emptiness. Jung noted that this fear often fades after shadow integration. By understanding your own darkness, you are less likely to be possessed by it. Power no longer needs to be abused or avoided, becomes a tool, not an identity. This is why late bloomers often exercise influence quietly, do not dominate. They stabilize. Another subtle change appears in how you experience time. Urgency dissolves. Life no longer feels like it is slipping away. Jung considered this one of the greatest rewards of late individuation. While others panic about aging, relevance, or missed opportunities, you feel an unexpected calm. Your life stops being divided into before and after. It begins to feel coherent. Past struggles integrate into a narrative that makes sense. Delay is no longer seen as failure, but as preparation. This is the stage where many late developing individuals begin contributing meaningfully to others, not as performers or motivators, but as stabilizing presences. People seek your perspective and trust your judgment. Jung believed that those who undergo deep individuation often become reference points for others, not because they pursue that role, but because their inner coherence reshapes the space around them. If earlier phases of your life were defined by confusion and restraint, this phase is defined by measured movement. You are no longer rushing to become someone. You're allowing what is already formed within you to express itself. And while this expression may still be quiet, it carries an authority that cannot be faked. Life no longer feels like a test you are failing. Instead, it feels like something you are finally ready to inhabit. By the time this stage is reached, a fundamental shift has already occurred. Life no longer appears as a race you are losing or a puzzle you cannot solve. Observe that the second half of life operates under a different psychological principle than the first. The first half focuses on adaptation, survival, and building an ego capable of functioning in the world. The second half centers on meaning, integration, and truth. Most people never complete this transition. They expend their energy defending identities chosen too early. But those who were never meant to succeed early arrive here prepared. For late developing individuals, the sense of relief can be surprising, while others fret about aging relevance.